Canada's Public Safety Minister is in hot water today after a conversation he had with his tenant was leaked. According to the Toronto Star, Minister Gary Anandasangaree told his tenant, a gun owner, that they're forging ahead with the gun buyback program because of electoral pressures in Quebec. The minister also said he would have a very different approach if he could start over from scratch. The Star also reports that he offered to compensate his tenant if the government's buyback program for his now banned guns wasn't sufficient enough. The minister was asked about these leaked remarks during question period today. Here's his response.
On Sunday, I had a conversation with an individual that I've known for many years who recorded it without my knowledge and had it leaked to a gun lobbyist. In that conversation, Mr. Speaker, the subject of the assault-style firearms buyback compensation program was discussed. In trying to address this issue, Mr. Speaker, the individual's frustration, my comments were misguided.
Let's bring back the power panel. Vandana Cutter, Kate Harrison, Brad Levine, and Rob Russo. So Vandana, I'll start with you. I wonder if the tenant is looking for a new home today after recording his landlord and leaking it. Not necessarily great tenant relations there. But seriously, about the content of the conversation that was recorded, I mean, it's not a great look if you're the minister who has to sell this gun buyback program, which, if we're to believe the recording, will be announced tomorrow. Now he's on tape kind of undermining the whole thing. Not very helpful, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Minister Anandasangaree, I think naivete, he has put himself in an awkward situation. I think he said he known this person for over several years. I believe it was 16 years. He's known this tenant clearly, but didn't think he'd be recorded. Now, what I think happened is that he didn't realize he'd be unrecorded. It sounded, when I heard some of the recording, that it wasn't going well, the conversation. I mean, he mentioned the tenant, that he has ARs. And I think he said what he needs to say to get out of a tricky situation. So not great, but I don't think it changes anything about the minister himself. I mean, I've known Minister Anandasangaree for many years. I've door knocked with him. He's doing what ministers are supposed to do, which is having difficult conversations with people who may feel differently about how you want to do policy. And he shouldn't be afraid, and generally, about having those conversations. We need to have politicians who are open to having conversations, even with those who disagree with him. So while I don't think it looks good for him, I don't think it changes the integrity of the minister or the work he's doing on this. And I think he has the full confidence of the Prime Minister.
Kate, in the recording, the minister says the police don't have the resources to enforce the gun buyback program in its entirety as it was kind of designed. And as I told you in the introduction there, that they're really pressing ahead with it because of electoral considerations, that the Quebec caucus and others in the province of Quebec are pushing for this. What's your take on this recording?
There's two issues here. There's the minister's conduct, and then there's the gun buyback program and the policy. On the minister's conduct, it's hard to claim political novice and amateur when he's been a sitting MP, I believe, since 2015. He was also the Justice Minister, I believe also the Crown Indigenous Minister at one point in time, and is now serving in this cabinet. There's getting out of a sticky conversation, and there's undermining your entire government's a core plank of your government's tough on crime legislation. So he should absolutely have known better in the course of that conversation. And unfortunately, for the minister, it's not his first lapse in judgment. So we will see if there's any kind of consequences for that. Perhaps more gravely, he has undermined a very core pillar of the government's justice strategy and approach. He's admitting what many have already known for some time, that the gun buyback program will have precisely zero effect on gun violence in this country. And now it's going to be difficult for Canadians to take that program seriously and the aims of that seriously when the minister is out there undercutting his government's very policy, the one that he's supposed to be promoting himself.
Yeah, I think, Brad, it's interesting that the minister also says essentially he would not have stood up a program like this if he had it his way. If they could start from scratch, they would not have implemented what's about to be implemented tomorrow, potentially, if we're to believe, again, the recording. And that they might have started fresh because there was this pressure from Quebec, but also there was a feeling that, it would be too politically risky to do away with something like this. But also this interesting factor he raises, too, that maybe this government is thinking about how to distance themselves from Trudeau, and they've decided to dump some of the old Liberal policies, but this is one that they're going to keep around. They're not going to get rid of the firearm buyback program. They're going to keep that one, even though they're trying to distinguish themselves from the Trudeau Liberals. What do you make of this? The poor minister is probably in a pickle.
Horrible.
Today.
Yeah, no, it's a bad situation for the minister and for this government, no question, for these reasons and others. And just to add to I think the damage, by undermining the program over which he sees, he's admitting that this is a flawed program, but gosh darn it, we're going to go ahead with it. It's like, it's admitting that this is flawed, but they're not going to change course when they have changed course on other policies. So it's not the inability to change course on public policy or even on promises they made just a short few months ago during the election campaign. There's other factors at play, like internal politics within the Liberal caucus, that are driving, in their own opinion, a flawed strategy. The second point I would raise is that this notion that the tenant gets the top-up from the minister himself if he is, undercut in the value of the firearms that are going to be part of the program that this individual would have. What about the other Canadians? I can only imagine, putting on my old practitioner's hat from Parliament Hill, I'd get up every day in question period and ask the minister, will he cover the costs for my constituents who feel that they got undercut on the program? Again, doesn't matter what you think about gun control. This is beyond that now. Obviously, there's too many guns, and a lot of the crime that's been committed in this country, horrible crimes, have been committed from guns smuggled in from the United States. And if we were, in the elbows up era, we should be putting the idea of stopping the gun violence that's coming from U.S. smuggled guns at the front and center of our gun control policy, instead of admitting that they're going ahead with a flawed Trudeau-era policy. Just really bad comms. And, JP, I would set the clock on this minister's time in this portfolio this afternoon.
Yeah, and just to explain what you were describing there, because the gun buyback program will offer firearms owners a certain price for the firearms, right, when they're taken in by police. And when this program is up and running, there is some concern from firearms owners that the price they're going to be offered is not going to make them whole on what they spent to purchase that firearm. And essentially the minister is saying here, I'll make you whole. I'll top you up. I will pay the difference. I'm not sure if he was joking or what the nature of those remarks were, but not necessarily a great look from a minister of the Crown to be suggesting to a constituent that he would be paying him to essentially make him go away or appease him for a program he doesn't like. Rob, let's talk about gun crime, because to Kate's earlier point about how, maybe the issue, and Brad just mentioned it too, maybe the issue isn't actually these legal handguns or other firearms that are being brought in. It's the Americans. Again, an issue here. I was doing some reporting on this issue earlier this summer, and the Toronto Police Service helpfully provided me with some data on this phenomenon. And as of last year in Toronto alone, 88% of all crime guns seized during a crime are from the United States. Illegal firearms from the United States. And that is not just in 2024. Over the last 10 years or so, the figure has varied from 70 to 88% of all guns used in a crime in Toronto captured by police come from the United States. So there are legitimate questions to be asked about whether this program is actually going to do anything to tamp down on crime in this country.
You can ask that question, but you can also ask, what more can you do to reduce gun crime? And if this is something that reduces gun crime, fine. If not, let's try something else, because I'm just a couple of hours stepping off the train from Toronto, where I spent the last 4 or 5 days, and I can tell you that crime and gun crime is a huge issue in the city of Toronto. So whatever you can do to bring it down, you do within reason. I want to come back to something that Brad said. He talked about the financial top-up. I'm very interested in the information top-up. As I said, I'm just off the train from Toronto. If I'd have known that there's a Minister of the Crown giving out secrets that have been discussed in Cabinet just by the fact that I could rent an apartment from him, I'd rent the apartment myself. I would have put a down payment and rented the place.
I know you would have too. You're that kind of reporter.
Get scoops, yeah.
Yeah. So why is a Minister of the Crown discussing something that has not yet been revealed to the public, maybe not even the caucus, about what's coming? It's rather astounding. And as Kate has said, this is a minister who's had a very tough year. He didn't know in the spring about his own program, about the restricted possession acquisition license. He didn't know about that when he was asked about it. He brought in C2, and it goes beyond strong borders. So there's lots of concerns and lots of questions about C2. I don't think people were adequately briefed about that. And we've all heard about the letters that he wrote on behalf of a former Tamil Tiger as well. This is a minister who is struggling, without a doubt, and a minister who is handing out information that shouldn't be handed out to somebody who's renting an apartment from. I don't even know if he's a constituent. There's got to be some very pointed questions asked of this minister.
Vandana?
I think this is a ministry that's one of the most challenging ones to be a part of. I mean, there's a reason why Ralph Goodale was the first public safety minister under this government, and with the experience he has, and why a lot of ministers struggle with this file. Now, I think Minister Sangaree has had a really good history here as an MP and as Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. Clearly, he still needs working through these challenges, but I am confident he's going to get through them. Again, he's a minister with a lot of integrity. It's a steep learning hill on this, but also that there's so many moving pieces to this. There's the borders, there's public safety, and all the elements that come with public safety. It's not just guns, it's community safety, it's programs, it's at-risk youth and young people. So there's so many parts to it that, I see that this has been a tough hill to climb, but I'm quite confident he's going to get on top of it.
I want to stay on the issue of crime because there's new polling out that suggests that this is one ballot box issue that is quickly rising the ranks among Canadians. The issues they care about most. Abacus data says crime and public safety is among the fastest growing concerns. 2 weeks ago, 16% of Canadians named it their top concern. Today, that number has jumped to 20%. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford wants action.
The federal government has to get their butt moving on bail reform, Young Offenders Act, mandatory sentencing. I can tell you one thing. It's always the economy and healthcare. When we do our polling, crime is right beside it now. People are done with it. So we're going to clean that up. But the federal government has to change the criminal code. They have to stop dragging their feet and start moving on this.
Let's do a very quick round on this. Kate, what do you make of this rising up the ranks of issues people care about most?
After the summer that we just had, it's not particularly surprising. A string of violent attacks and assaults. Obviously, that high-profile case in Lindsay, Ontario, of a man trying to defend himself in his own home and being subsequently charged. So it's a pretty short leap to understand why Canadians are so concerned about crime. And right now, I think if Canadians were to assess the federal government's performance on it, it's a lot of finger pointing. It's a lot of blame game. They're in turn turning to the provinces. The provinces are turning to the feds. And certainly the public safety minister's actions today don't do much to instill a lot of confidence in Canadians that the government is anything but asleep at the switch on this issue. So I think this, as immigration was perhaps last year, is a really simmering public policy issue for a lot of Canadians, and that the government will have to make some pretty bold moves, I think, to really reverse course on the narrative that they are not taking these issues as seriously as perhaps other political parties are.
Yeah, Brad, and speaking of the narrative, when you look at the StatsCan data, they actually show that crime was down last year. It was down 3.6%, the number of police-reported crimes. The Toronto Police Service is, again, I love their data. They're very transparent with Canadians. They're showing that double-digit declines in shootings, homicides, and auto thefts in Canada's biggest city already this year in 2025. So as people are caring most about this issue, crime is starting to recede a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's funny because, and this is one of the tricks, I think, of politics, and that is the data will say one thing, and the emotions or the feelings of the electorate will say something else. The same with the economy. If people feel like they're struggling with cost of living, you can't say, no, you're wrong. The economy just grew, 5% of GDP or something like that. You got to meet them where they're at. What's interesting about that poll is that where is crime driving those numbers? It's in Ontario and in the prairies. And I really appreciate Mr. Ford's ability to immediately pass off the rise in the concern about it as if it's just the feds. And the federal government does have a big role. Bail reform has been called for by many provinces from different parties. And I know that Minister Fraser has already signaled that the House will see some bail reform legislation in the near term. So that's something that's already, I think, a launched vote for that. But let's be fair, Premier Ford. You have a lot of role in crime as well. It's not just the federal government. All three levels of government have a role to play in reducing crime, and we have an obligation to make sure that even though the crime stats are down, people are still concerned about it, and that still means that the elected officials have to address it.
Rob?
No matter what the figures show, you can always do more to reduce violent crime. Actually, the figures show across Canada that violent crime is actually static. Even if it's down in Toronto and Ontario, it's actually
It's
static.
non-violent,
But
that's
that
down
doesn't
the
mean you
most.
stop.
Yeah.
I mean, if people don't feel safe, no matter how much crime is there, you keep going after the crime. I agree with Brad, though. The administration of justice is a provincial jurisdiction, and more can be done by the provinces, including Ontario, to go after people who are out on bail. They're the ones who are supposed to pay the police to go out there and find the people who've jumped bail, and they need to put more resources in that as well.
Vandana, very quick final word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I will echo what other people have said. Like, this is a mix between the feds and the province. The province has a lot of responsibility here too. But I think, like, I live in Toronto now, and every day on CP24, not saying people should watch another newscast, but it is common to see a new shooting every single day. So whether people feel the stats or not, people see that and they think, oh my God, my child can be shot in their home. Oh my God, my car can be stolen, and they're worried. So this is a complicated issue. It's not something that's solved with one thing, but I think it's something that is definitely top of Canadians' minds.